companies now know that their audiences will forgive them for making mistakes as long as the mistakes are in the right direction.
Right, as long as it's ideologically correct.
As long as it's ideologically correct. So there was a whole generation of reporters who were raised like me. Like our whole thing was the night before we published something, we couldn't sleep because we were afraid of that one thing that would be fucked up in the report that somebody would catch the next day, and that might end your career, right? Like if you got something really, really badly wrong, it was potentially a career-ending thing, especially if you made some kind of ethical mistake in forgetting to check something. So that terror was common to all reporters until recently. Now all of a sudden, when you make a really, really bad mistake, your audience is probably going to be fine with it. They don't punish you for it in the same way. And they've basically brought in a whole generation of people who have this ethos of, well, so what if it's wrong? Which is why all these people no longer have faith in these companies, and they can't see it. It's amazing that they can't see it. But people are leaving these companies. They're no longer trusting them. And they don't see that correlation, which is incredible to me.
It's very strange, but again, it fuels this thing that I think is very good, which is trustworthy, independent media. Like Crystal and Sagar, when they had their old show, Rising on the Hill, they decided to leave, and when they decided to leave, we had a group conversation on the phone, and they were asking me advice, and I was like, I think you guys are going to be gigantic when you leave. I think it's going to be bigger than ever. You'll be completely free. You won't have to worry about any editorial control, and you don't need anybody. I mean, I'll help you. Everybody else will help you. The show's already excellent, but it's excellent entirely because of you two. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with being attached to any other organization that's going to siphon money off of you.
Yeah.
And so look at them. They were number one almost instantly,
right? And
they've maintained that position the entire time, and they're bigger than ever now.
Right. Yeah. And they were raised. They had that hesitation because we're raised in media, in professional corporate media, to be terrified of leaving the fold. Now, I actually came up through alternative media, so I wasn't afraid of leaving it. I had my own newspapers when I lived overseas. The idea of being out in the wilderness didn't frighten me so much. So when I moved to Substack, I just thought this is probably going to be cool. It's probably going to work, right? But a lot of people who came up,
yeah,
you do think, wow, I'm never gonna get back into the club, and if I don't make enough money, that's it. That's it for me. Which is why they're staying. But look at how much success they've had. The audience out there is huge. Yeah. They're probably making more money than they ever dreamed they would make, and there's opportunities to do all kinds of amazing things now because of that.
Yeah, there really is. And, I was really fortunate that I had other jobs when I first started doing this podcast. And the podcast was never, the beginning of it at first was never for money. It was just for fun. Mm-hmm. I never thought of it as a job at all. And so when I had gotten it to the point where it started to become valuable, there were a bunch of vultures that tried to buy half of it or take over. Like there was one like podcast network that literally wanted to take 50% of the show just to be on the network. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like,
why would I do that?
They go, well, you'll have more ad revenue because you'll be connected to our our network. I go, what fucking network?
Right.
Like, this is a podcast, man. This is a different, like, they didn't even understand. And this was quite a few years ago before it had gotten big. But the point is, I know friends that took that deal, that gave their podcast over to this network and became a part of it. And now they're probably kicking themselves.
Right.
Because, like, I'm sure it's like a permanent deal. Like, I'm sure they own 50% of it forever, or whatever percentage maybe they started with 50 and negotiated down. I don't know, but the point is there's so many people that when given the opportunity to have like some real security, like you're going to be connected to this network, they're going to protect you, they're going to bring in the ads, you don't have to do anything, and they just take a percentage of it, but you will always have income because you'll be connected to us, and we are a big corporation, and you're like, oh, just like when I was on NBC, This is going to be great. Like, it'll give me security, and you start thinking about your mortgage, and you start thinking about your kids' college and all that stuff, and you go, okay, this is a good thing. And it's hard. It's hard to just say, no, I'm going to be independent. But this is the time. This is the best time ever to be independent.
Yeah, no, and that's why it is a very hard decision for people to walk away and go independent and do the thing, what I did, what Glenn did, what Crystal and Kyle did. But it works, and the other choice, staying with traditional media, is increasingly not a good bargain for you. Not only, is the piece of the pie there getting smaller and smaller all the time because their ratings are getting worse, the advertising revenue is dropping off, but the ideological conformity in those organizations is getting worse, and that is something that never used to exist before, or at least not to this degree, anywhere near this degree. So you're going to be miserable doing that. You might as well do the job the way you want to do it correctly, and get paid in a commensurate way for doing it.
I think there's a bunch of people, though, that haven't established a large following that are worried, rightly so, of being lost in this.
Sure.
So I don't think this is available to anyone. It's obviously available to you and to Glenn and to Jimmy Dore and a lot of these other people that they've already gathered up a large, loyal audience because they know that they can trust these people. Mm-hmm. Or the people rather know they can trust them to be honest and to just give their take on things. But there's a lot of people that they're stuck because, they're not really well known and they're kind of in this system and they're realizing while they're in this system that it's pretty fucked. And you have two choices. Either you try to fight against it and you might get ostracized, or you try to conform and then you get lost.
Right.
And then you become what you despise.
Right.
Which is more common than not, right?
Yeah, I think that's what's happening. Either they're moving the people out, which you see at an organization like the New York Times, where they're just kind of moving the old guard out, the old traditional reporting types, and they had a lot of really amazing reporters at the New York Times, people who really knew how to do the job, and they're just kind of being pushed out, whether for one reason or another. Or the other thing is you stay in, and gradually the mindset takes hold of you, and you get lost mentally, and I think that's what's happening to a lot of people. I mean, I knew Rachel back in her Air America days. We were friends once, sort of, and it's amazing to me what's happened.
I read your book with her and who else on the cover? Hannity's on the cover.
Yeah.
Is that Hating? That's right. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to fuck it up, so I didn't want to guess.
Okay.
But when you compared her, when you said Rachel Maddow is Bill O'Reilly, mm-hmm. You're like, Jesus Christ, but you're like, but wait, I think he's right. Like, it's just ideologically opposite, but the same kind of thing, where there's just like blind allegiance to the party doctrine.
Right.